what do you do in an inflationary environment? As somebody who's not, I don't consider myself a savvy investor. And so I used to joke with my money manager, I want to be as close to my money buried in the backyard as possible. And obviously for inflation reasons, I have since learned that that is a terrible strategy. But what do you do?
Well, first thing is you realize that holding cash and dead assets is a bad thing. So a lot of money is in cash because people think that cash is the safest investment. But they are measuring that in the amount of money that they get, nominal returns, and they say it doesn't wiggle much. But think about it. It's lost, as of the most recent statistics, 8.5% over the last, inflation is 8.5%, and they receive virtually no interest rate in cash. And so there was an 8.5% loss of buying power as a result of inflation. And so psychology should change, and is in the process of changing, to realize that you have to think in terms of buying power, not the number of dollars you have. And you have to think how much is your buying power. And so the worst thing is to be in cash. Like I say, cash is trash, and to be into and to be out of the bonds. The next thing is to have a diversified portfolio of assets. The diversification means some assets that are inflation hedge prone. For example, you're better off to own an inflation index bond than a regular bond.
What makes something an inflation index? Like what are the nature? Is that going to be gold and precious metals, tangible things? Like what are the things that are resistant to inflation?
Yes, and inflation index bonds, because their returns are tied to inflation.
Interesting. I don't understand that well enough to know how one would do that. Is that worth going into? I don't know what the punchline is going to be.
Yeah, I think the punchline is, if you take a look at it, it's simple. It's like a regular bond, except its payments are linked to the inflation, so they compensate you for inflation.
So is this a government bond?
Yeah, government bond.
Okay.
And there are some tax advantages to them too. So look into them. Okay.
And why don't people just flood into that?
Well, I think it's one type of asset. Now, flooding into any one thing is an issue, but moving from the nominal bonds, in which the government just says, I'll give you this amount of money, and it has the unbelievable and unlimited ability to print the money it gives you, it would favor inflation index bonds. And it can be other assets. Some people would say something in terms of cryptocurrencies, or it might be those other assets. I think.
What's your take on crypto? So crypto is a huge part of my portfolio. I think you'd be mortified to see just how much so. But yeah, what are your thoughts on crypto?
I think that too much people pay too much attention to one at the extreme of the other. That either somebody's all crypto, or they're all gold, or they're all something. And I believe that that's a challenge. I think that crypto, like gold, is not a productivity earning asset, and it can be controlled by governments in lots of ways. It's been outlawed in a number of places, and it also can be monitored. The privacy element is not secure from governments doing monitoring, and so and the size of crypto is about the size of Microsoft. It's all crypto combined. And so to be overly concentrated in it, in my opinion, is a mistake. But to have some of it is a good thing. So the question is always what amount of it.
Mm.
So that's I have a little bit about it. I'd probably shock you about how little I have. You would shock me about how much you have, but having some of it. So and other things I would say is that geographic location is important. In other words, not just all in U.S. and U.S. dollar assets. I would say that the three things that again I'm looking at if I go down countries is first, are they earning more than they're spending? Do they have a good income statement and balance sheet? This is going to be very important in the period ahead because the amount of credit that's going to be available to bridge the gap between spending and earning, cash flows and so on, is going to be quite narrower. So a lot of companies even that were able to raise cash and not have good cash flow because of maybe growth expectations in the future will find it more difficult. That'll be true for individuals. It'll be true for countries. So does it have a good income statement and balance sheet will be important. The second is places. How are they working with each other? Is there civility or is there civil war, on the brink of civil war? Because countries where they work well together, they're productive, are going to have a real competitive advantage. Orderly places, safe places to be
What are countries on the rise in that? So obviously I'm shocked to say this out loud, but the US would be in a bad place in terms of that. What are places that have great stability there?
Well, there are parts in the United States that are better than other parts of the United States.
Meaning like local government bonds or something like that?
Well, I'm out talking about the like where you want to be, and then that'll be. But yes, it could be bonds, it could be places. I'm talking now the places. For example, we just had the shooting in New York City on the subway, and New York City's becoming more dangerous. Chicago's becoming more dangerous. San Francisco's becoming more dangerous. You're seeing people leave some places for other places. You're seeing them leave, I don't know, to Texas is Austin, or to Florida and so on. So there are differences within the United States and differences from the United States.
So you mean people need to think about picking up and moving and actually going and being in a different place.
Yeah, and those are also the better places economically, because when people do leave, and they do that, those who leave are higher income and higher taxpayers. And as a result, there's more of a hollowing out that takes place in that, which creates an economic problem as well as a lifestyle problem. So I think you're going to see greater differentiation in places, which affects where you want to be and where people who can afford to be there want to be, and also affects what their economies and markets are like. And then the United States. And the third element is, are they financially strong? In other words, income more than expenses and good balance sheet. Are they civil with each other? So they're working together rather than hurting each other. And number three is, are they in a position where they're likely to be in a war, or are they likely to be out of a war? You don't want to be in a war. So, and those places, investing wise, history has shown, do worse because they have to spend more money. There's more problems, more pain that's being exchanged. Neutral countries in wars do very well, as it turns out. So elements of diversification. So it's a long-winded answer to your question, but I would not want to be in debt or cash and those instruments. I would want to diversify well with a bias toward inflation protected assets. And I would want to diversify between locations, countries, in terms of the investment based on the criteria I've just mentioned.
Okay, that all makes sense. Now, you've said that competing in the markets is harder than competing in the Olympics, which I found funny and distressing all at the same time. You said that you guys at Bridgewater spend hundreds of millions of dollars on research alone, and that somebody like me is going to have to compete with that. So what's the advice for the average person that isn't going to be doing that? And how often should people be reassessing? I feel like in a turbulent environment, should I be looking at this like every week? Like how often, and do you, like if you were managing your personal account without computers, at least without the, sort of hyper auto trading, how often are you looking at it? And how do you avoid trying to compete against the best of the best of the best?
I think that you have to understand what a good strategic asset allocation mix is. That is, how to create a good, well-diversified portfolio, assuming that you don't know how to make these buy and sell decisions. Because what happens is, think of it, it's like a poker game, and you're playing against others. And those others are putting in, most lose, most buy at the highs and sell at the lows. Most behave emotionally. Most don't have the same information. So it's a very difficult game. Like I say, you wouldn't think I'm going to go try to compete in the Olympics, but more people think that they can compete in the markets. They think, I think the markets are going to go up or down. And the track records there are terrible for most people, okay, because of those handicaps relative to others. So for that reason, you start off with a well-diversified, balanced portfolio, because diversification can reduce your risk without reducing your return. If you understand how to get equally attractive investments that are not correlated with each other, that diversify each other, you can build a diversified portfolio. It would take too long for me to explain, how to do that right now, but that becomes the headline. I described it in my book, Principles for Life and Work. Also, Tony Robbins described it, and he asked me about it, and then described it in his book. I forgot the name of it.
Money Master the Game.
Okay, and he describes it pretty well. And for that, I direct you there. I'm going to be writing a book. I'm in the process of doing it, about economic and investment principles, and then I'll describe it more completely. But right now, that's the best I can do in this interview.
If you like that clip, check out another powerful clip right here, and I'll see you there.